let's see. 20 minutes after 11 o'clock. Let's double check my clock. It just seems like it's still earlier than that.
Yeah.
All right, so Sunday, as our family Easter gathering, we went to Salt Springs. And Salt Springs is it's out in the Ocala National Forest, for those who don't know. And it was the first time I had been there in probably 30 years. And I had been to Juniper Springs, also in the National Forest, and also to the Silver River State Park, also in the same Ocala National Park. Okay, so the other two, I always come back with ticks. Always. If I brought my dog when my dog was alive, if I brought my dog, always come back with ticks, right?
Yeah.
You have to check and check and check. And it's like, oh my gosh, I almost hate going there because of the ticks. Salt Springs, no ticks. I don't know why. I don't know why, or if I did something differently. But ticks, it's not just the creepiness of them. It's the diseases they carry. Lyme disease is one of them. Dr. Darin Ingels is on the phone. He has written the book that you can probably see the cover of on the podcast if you're watching the streaming thing we're doing. The book is called The Lyme Solution. This is, by the way, a #1 new book, and it just came out. This is a 5-part plan to fight the inflammatory autoimmune response and beat Lyme disease. Dr. Darin Ingels, good morning, sir.
Oh, good morning, Larry. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you calling from?
I am currently in Connecticut.
Do you have ticks in Connecticut? Do you?
Well, considering that Lyme disease is named after Lyme, Connecticut, this is where we originally discovered it in the late 70s, early 80s. We are the hotbed of Lyme disease.
Oh, really?
Wow.
See, I grew up on Long Island, not too far from you, and I don't remember ever seeing a tick. Maybe they eradicated them on Long Island. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny, Lyme is something that we've really kind of thought about in the last 40 years, but we've actually identified it in an Iceman we pulled out of Austria 5,000 years old. So we know that this organism has been around for thousands of years, but it's really in the last 40-plus years that we've seen this growing epidemic of Lyme disease really around the world.
Your book right now is #1 in the communicable diseases category. It's #2 in long-term care category. #3 in communicable diseases category as a Kindle. And #15 in the immune system. So all of this on Amazon. So obviously people are interested in this topic. Is it more common than we realize, the Lyme disease?
I think so. I think what we've seen is this growing epidemic, and if you live outside of areas that are typically known for Lyme disease, such as New England and the central Midwest, so for you folks in Florida, I've worked with several patients in Florida who had symptoms of Lyme, went to their doctor, and their doctor absolutely dismissed them and said, no, there's no Lyme disease in Florida, that's not possible, and won't even bother testing them. And then they fly up to see me here in Connecticut, and I test them, and they're positive. So, we have this growing problem of, an increased incidence of Lyme, but certainly ignorance, I think, in the medical community in, considering that Lyme's a possibility, even if you live in an area outside of, New England and the central Midwest.
Is Lyme disease curable?
It is. Certainly the earlier you identify it, the better chance you have of eradicating it completely. We have a question about whether you get rid of Lyme disease 100%, and the God's honest truth is we don't really know. We can't measure the Lyme organism directly in the body, so we depend on antibody tests to give us evidence that you've had exposure to it. But I've certainly had patients that have had Lyme for months to years, and we get them to a point where they're living really symptom-free. So is that cure? In my book, it is. But I've also had patients that went many years of being symptom-free and then came through some very stressful event in their life and started to relapse and get symptoms again. So is it a new infection? Is it just a relapse of an old infection? Hard to know, but my opinion is I think it's probably the organism that's there that just stays quiet. So if you can get to a point where you live with it and it lives with you and you don't bother each other, I think that's a pretty good state to be in.
Wow.
Is the only way we get it through tick bites?
It's the primary way. It's interesting. I actually have a doctor friend in Orlando whose son's an entomologist down in Naples, and we had this discussion. There's actually some evidence out of Europe that mosquitoes transmit Lyme disease as well, and his work is studying the mosquitoes of Florida. And he says, no, that's not possible. And I said, well, The fact that they haven't done the research in the U.S. kind of leaves it open for, I guess, interpretation, but there's at least a few studies out of Europe that shows that mosquitoes and fleas potentially carry Lyme disease. So, and having seen a lot of patients, again, who live in areas that aren't endemic for deer ticks, I think that certainly is a possibility.
Are there any similarities between Lyme disease and allergies and autism?
Well, we call Lyme the great mimic or the great imitator. It looks like a lot of other conditions. So a lot of these diagnoses out there are pretty vague. So chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autism. A lot of these have, the doctor can tell you what the condition is, but they can't tell you why. And I think we've got some pretty good evidence in the medical literature that Lyme and some of these other co-infections can be triggers for these conditions. My argument in my book is that, Lyme is initially an infection, and after you've had it a while, it sort of transforms itself really into an autoimmune condition. And it's not autoimmunity like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, but we do find that your body starts making antibodies that target your brain, your connective tissue, and so forth. So I think for people with chronic Lyme disease, so we got some pretty good evidence that you're really dealing with sort of a chronic autoimmune issue versus just a straight-up infection.
So does the book outline a diet? Is it what we eat that'll help us out?
Well, that's part of it. The book is really a 5-step plan that anybody can do at home without necessarily having a doctor oversee it. And one of those parts is really about managing your diet. And what I recommend is what's called an alkaline diet. And it's about eating foods that really make your cells more alkaline, with the exception of your stomach, your bladder, and for women, the vaginal area that's very acidic to help protect against outside invaders. The rest of your cells are very alkaline. So that makes sure that the cell physiologically works the way it's supposed to, all the enzymes work the way they're supposed to, and that you're optimizing cellular function. One of the things that acid does is that as it accumulates in the body, it tends to promote more inflammation. So at the end of the day, this diet is really an anti-inflammatory diet.
So what are some of the symptoms then, that we might have to indicate Lyme disease?
Well, in acute Lyme disease, it can look a little bit different than chronic Lyme disease. Acute Lyme disease looks a little bit kind of like the flu, where you can get fever, chills, you can feel fatigued, you can get swollen lymph nodes, muscle aches. But the one telltale sign of acute Lyme disease is what's called a bullseye rash. Wherever the tick bites you, it leaves this series of concentric rings that looks like a target or a bullseye. And if you see that, that's a hands-down slam dunk. You know you have Lyme. There's no other insect that bites you and leaves that particular mark. Now, it's a bit confusing because the CDC says that 80% of the people who get bit by a tick that carries Lyme will get this rash. We actually know that it's only about 40%, so not even half the people who get Lyme. And certainly in my practice, most of the people I see who have Lyme never at least saw the rash. As it translates into chronic Lyme, it varies a little bit more. You can still get a lot of those acute symptoms, but then we start seeing more neurological symptoms, more arthritic symptoms. So people complain of short-term memory loss. They'll feel dizzy, lightheaded. They'll feel clumsy. They drop things. They can get neck pain. One of the things that's very characteristic of Lyme, too, is what we call wandering pain. And so one day it's your right shoulder that hurts, the next day it's your left knee, and the next day it's your right ankle. Again, there's really nothing else that causes that other than Lyme. So when I see the chronic Lyme patients and I hear about this wandering pain, that certainly, again, raises a red flag. That could be
really?
Lyme.
I want to ask you about the alkaline diet and in increasing the alkalinity of your body. The reason I want to ask you, and I'm not expecting you necessarily to comment on alkalinity and cancer, but the reason I'm asking you is because of another interview we did. That doctor suggested that if we could make ourselves more alkaline, we could resist cancer better. And then everybody's an armchair quarterback, and I had a few calls from people saying, I don't understand how that could be because your stomach has got whatever hydrochloric acid in it, and doesn't everything become acidic? But it sounds like what you're saying is along the same lines of what he was saying, although you're not associating it with a preventiveness for cancer.
Right. Well, again, the stomach does make acid. Acid is a very important part of digesting protein. But what happens...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
As soon as as soon as it goes into your small intestine, your body makes a bunch of alkaline fluid to neutralize the acid. So that acidic state is a very short term just for digestion. And again, we're not really talking about what's going on in the GI tract as much as we're talking about the rest of your body, the rest of your cells.
Wow.
So again, we know physiologically that when your cells are in a more alkaline pH, everything the cell's supposed to do works better. So again, I've never read any study specifically looking at an alkaline diet in cancer. In fact, the amount of research on alkaline diet is actually pretty minimal, which is surprising. Of course, there's no money in it, but the studies that have been done have always shown positive effects on how it works, physiologically.
Wow, this is the godsend for the folks who are suffering from Lyme disease. Okay, so the book is called The Lyme Solution. I have a copy of the book. This is the #1 best-selling book right now. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago. Call me if you want the copy that was sent to me. It's The Lyme Solution, a 5-part plan written by Dr. Darin Ingels. The rest of us have to go buy it. I did find it on Amazon. Before we say goodbye, real quick, I know I'm keeping you late here. Do you have a website we can go to?
Absolutely. It's DarinIngelsND.com, DarinIngelsND.com, and we got some great information about the book and Lyme disease.
Okay. Dr. Ingels, thank you for your work, and thank you for being on our show today.
Great. Thanks, Larry and Robin.
You're welcome. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Hi, I'm Russ Moore with Pike Mill. Our relationship with WOCA started in 2009. WOCA is family-friendly, community-involved station. When we moved to our new location on 17th Street in October of 2016, of course, we went to WOCA so they could tell everybody our new location. The folks at WOCA really care about their clients and want them to be successful. For all of your shipping needs, call Pike Mill, and to tell the Ocala area about your business, call WOCA, because WOCA radio gets results.
Load it, haul it, dump it, mow it.
This Saturday, it's Steer a Deer Demo Day at Ag Pro. Test drive the John Deere of your dreams. We've got over 20 compact models to demo. Put them through their paces. Pick your favorite, get special low financing, and be equipped for anything. Join us this Saturday at Steer a Deer Demo Day. Find your nearest location at agproco.com/demo day. Today in Florida Ag News, from the Southeast AgNet, NAFTA talks are facing possible turning point this month that will yield either a breakthrough or even the suspension of talks. Mexico's Congress wraps up its regular session April 30th, and the country is widely expected to elect a new anti-NAFTA president on July 1st, and the U.S. holds key midterm congressional elections in November. Against all of that, the 8th round of NAFTA talks is planned to start here next week. U.S. Trade Ambassador Robert Lighthizer told the Senate Finance Committee last month,
"We have already had 7 rounds of talks, and I believe that substantial progress is being made, but we are quickly running out of time if we're going to have this Congress vote on a final passage."
But differences do remain, including the U.S. proposal to sunset NAFTA.
What we gave and what we got is so out of balance, it's reasonable to suggest that we ought to try to rebalance it. Things change, the economy changes.
Some say negotiations could go all the way into next year.
Get season-long parasite control with prescription long-range eprinamectin. Long-range with eprinamectin controls parasites in cattle for up to 150 days with a single spring treatment. You get all the benefits of multiple dewormer applications without the labor. However you want to spend all that free time in the fall is up to you. Our strategic parasite control can help with earlier conception, resulting in additional weight and weaning. Ready to see the difference in your herd's performance? All backed by our satisfaction guarantee. Talk to your veterinarian or Beringer Ingelheim representative. And for full prescribing information, visit thelongrangelook.com. Federal law restricts this drug to use by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian. For use in cattle only, not for use in humans or other animal species. Keep out of reach of children. Not for use in breeding bulls or in calves less than 3 months of age. Not for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows or